Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of The Guys Who Stared. Stats Cade Kennedy with you here, joined by Tyler Riggs. And folks, week 6 of the college football season, we don't get to say this often, but usually once a year, you get what we call, upset week, chaos week, whatever you want to call it. And that is exactly what happened. So before we jump into it, feel free to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and leave a comment down below. Tell us, do you agree with our takeaways? Disagree? What are your own thoughts on what was a wild week in college football, to say the absolute least, Tyler? I mean, I don't think anyone expected what we had going on.
No, it's always those weeks where you look at the schedule and say, okay, one ranked matchup. What is this? You could snooze, you could not pay attention, and then sure enough, it delivers just as we all expect, right? What a chaotic week.
Absolutely. And I mean, let's just jump right into it. The game that I keep in mind, I was working, I work at the local Division II school here in Northwestern Oklahoma State. I always wear the hat. And the buzz through the press box during our game was, hey, Alabama and Vanderbilt is actually a game this week. That's something we didn't expect to say. That's a funny joke. And then Vanderbilt's winning at halftime. And then Vanderbilt's winning in the end of the third quarter. And then it's 40-28 Vanderbilt with 5 minutes left. And it became reality quicker than I ever thought it could. But Vanderbilt beating a number 1 team for the first time ever, beating an AP top 5 team for the first time ever, beating Alabama for the first time since the 80s. Just everything you could want to happen. I mean, this is like a dream upset scenario, Tyler. This is something people did on video games for years because it was too unrealistic. And now it has become reality.
It has. And, the crazier part of it is Bam all week was telling us hey, we know this is a trap game. This is something we're prepared for. You think that, oh, wow, we're going to get it done. And no, they go and flop still.
And I mean, just the crazy thing about this, Tyler, is I talked about it a little bit in my instant reaction last night. And I mean, it's the key to the game, just hovering over that time of possession and the turnover margin. We talk about, anatomy of an upset. How do these types of games happen? Vanderbilt sits on the ball for 42 minutes and forces 2 Alabama turnovers. Anytime you get something like that, you're going to put yourself in an insanely good position to win. And then you have an offense that's designed to just beat you multiple ways. And it all starts with Diego Pavia. It really does. I mean, you look at the stat line here, 16 for 20, 252 through the air, 2 TDs, had 20 carries on the ground as well. He is the definition of a do-it-all type of guy, and he played as phenomenal of a game as you could. I mean, there was no mistake he really made during the game. It was one of those just fantastic performances. Well, one of the best performances I can remember by any quarterback from Vanderbilt, really.
The journey he's been on, it started as a walk-on New Mexico Military Institute, and to get to this point, it's every kid's dream. Again, you talk about the video game side. That's what we do on video games, right? Start bad somewhere. Now with the new transfer thing on College Football 25, you can do that. But played as well as you could ask. Was not afraid of the moment, and that's what goes into it. It starts with confidence. When you tell kids, "Hey, you got to believe in yourself first," and that's how things like this happen.
Absolutely. And I mean, just looking at the stat line here, I mean, pulling up the box score and looking at it, it's one of those weird games where you look at it, and for Alabama, I mean, offensively, it's not like they played bad or anything. It's not like this was just a complete meltdown on the Alabama side. It's just Vanderbilt had one of the best game plans you could have to attack a team like this. If you find some weaknesses in that defense, you can get it to a guy like Eli Stowers. You can get him going, and that's exactly what happened there. 6 catches for 113. Just attacking Alabama in multiple different ways, and with some creative play calls, I thought, as well. There's some shovel option in there. There's some fakes every once in a while. Every play kind of seems to have a different route to it, or maybe it's a little bit of a wrinkle in there you don't expect. Vanderbilt played this about as well as any team could, and I think that's really a big part of this. You find a way to catch Alabama napping, and that's exactly what happened in this one. It's just one of those that, and I'm going to sound like a broken record from yesterday, every time I look at this box score, it still confuses me a little bit. Every time I look up there and see that 40-35 with Vanderbilt's score highlighted.
Yeah, and the final point I can make on it leads to a larger picture and one that, reflects, I think, on a slate like this. We all thought transfer portal, and the NIL might cause some damage to the smaller teams, right? Your non-Power 5 guys and really your weaker teams in the Power 5. Well, I think it's done the opposite for those weaker teams in the Power 5. It's given a chance for Vanderbilt to gather some talent from, the smaller conferences and get guys that may have been at Bama, right? Or may have been committed to Bama at one point and realize, hey, I'm going to be sitting for 2 or 3 years. I want a quicker opportunity now. Uh, and those guys have been attracted to those lower Power 5 schools, and that brings that talent level a little closer. You don't have Bama, Georgia just stacking up all the 5 stars. They still get their recruits, but in terms of the second and third unit guys that sometimes have to step up in these moments, all of a sudden they're not as deep. So I think that's another recipe of how this, comes to be. Not only a game like this, but a week like this.
I agree. I think, and we'll continue to see that more in the future. We've seen it a bit now that you're going to have a little bit more parity in college football. And I mean, it produces things like this. I think, this is why we have this every year. Someone seems to write the article or have the talking point, is this the end of college football as we know it? And it's changed a lot in the past 10 years. Don't get me wrong. But I think what we're looking at is it allows a guy like Clark Lee to come in and actually build up a Vanderbilt. We've seen Rutgers get rebuilt up. We've seen Kansas look competitive. It might be Vandy's time now, Tyler.
Could very well be, Cade. Could very well be.
But we've got to go from one SEC upset to another one here. This is one of the other games of the week that I had written down. It's Tennessee playing at Arkansas. Hey, it's another primetime game for the Vols, another opportunity to show the world what they're made of this year. And that was exactly what they did not do, Tyler. I mean, this was, you want to talk about an ugly slugfest of a game. That's what it was. It's 3-0 Arkansas at halftime. Tennessee finally starts to wake up in the second half. Dylan Sampson gets some nice touchdown runs. But Tennessee just looked all out of sorts, and credit to Arkansas's defense there, making the big plays when they had to on both sides of the ball. And Arkansas having to switch to a backup quarterback, drive down the field, with, get a 2-minute drill going here to try to win the game. Arkansas does it. You get the giant field storm there. And Arkansas, a 19-14 win. And, we talked about this a little bit last night, Tyler, that going into the year, I don't think anyone expected this from Arkansas. I don't think anyone expected them to be this gritty and tough of a team. But they've shown all the points that you need to here. You have so much going Arkansas's way, a program that seems like it's had so much go against them, to have this breakthrough win. First time they've beat a top 5 team since LSU back in 2007. Yes, it really has been that long. Arkansas finally taking that step forward once again as a program.
Yeah, what a big one, right? What a big one. We joked, off air about when we were talking about it, or somebody in cowboy hat shirtless on the goalpost. We thought it might have been Sam Pittman originally because that's his type of style. But yeah, this was much needed for Arkansas, no question. For Tennessee, disappointing, I would think, quite a bit, just to come out like you did and not really respond. You get that, especially when you get up 14-3 that third quarter. You think, okay, Tennessee's coming alive. They're shoving the ball, down Arkansas's throat with the run game because Dylan Sampson was really good in this game for him. And this is where I think, Cade, we saw some of that freshmanness of Nico, right? Because leading this offense from that point on didn't quite produce the way you'd hope. It wasn't asked a ton of, but didn't quite really attribute himself to making big plays, and that's what you got to do if you're going to win road games in the SEC.
Absolutely. And I mean, to your point, I completely agree with you. When Tennessee gets up 11, this felt like, okay, that was a fun upset half, everybody, but Arkansas had multiple chances, missed field goals, going for it on fourth down that didn't, conversions that didn't work. It felt like Arkansas had their opportunity. But for me, just looking at it from Arkansas's side, the ability to take a few punches, hang around in there, and still find a way to win. How many games have we seen Arkansas do that and still find a way to lose? I mean, we've seen
Oh,
it twice this
1,000%,
year
right?
already with Oklahoma State and Texas A&M. It's just that is the win Sam Pittman needed. That is the win the state of Arkansas really needed. That entire fan base, everyone pulls for the Hogs there. Just could not be more massive for Arkansas. And then for Tennessee, like you said, I thought we saw some of the inexperience of Nico, especially at the end of the game where, hey, this is a situation where you've got to make a play here. And what does he do? He ends up getting ran out of bounds. And just, you can't do that. Obviously, he knows that. That's a freshman mistake. He'll learn from it. Tennessee will continue to improve. But still, just another point on the weird week we had. But we will move on from those two games here to kind of what I consider game number 3 in terms of the scale of, we do top 5 games of the week here of, what games stood out to us the most. This is maybe the weirdest one in a way to me, Tyler, purely because this is Big Ten ball. Minnesota, a 24-17 win over USC. I mean, you want to talk about Alabama, Vanderbilt, that's completely fantasy land type of upset. Tennessee losing to Arkansas, that's okay. You can kind of make a case where I could see that could maybe happen. This one felt just like a stunner to me. It never in my wildest dreams would I have thought USC would go to Minnesota. I could see them struggling. I could see Minnesota landing a punch or two here that makes this a ball game. I didn't expect to see USC fall apart like this, but in the back of my mind, I can see a way where it happens. It's one of those, it's so unrealistic, it becomes realistic. And that's what played out here. Minnesota, to their credit, the game plan, pretty simple. Just try to continue that bully ball here. We're going to run it well. Max Brosmer, talk about a quarterback having 3 rushing touchdowns on the day. He played efficient at his position, 15 for 19 and 169 through the air, and forcing turnovers. I mean, that's been a problem for USC. If the defense starts to get in a bit of a bind, you can't turn the ball over. And what did USC do? They had 3 different turnovers in the game. Minnesota dominates the fourth quarter and gets the 2 touchdowns they needed. And PJ Fleck, a giant win for him, where some Minnesota fans were starting to think, is this the discussion where we maybe start to think about putting him on the hot seat? That's definitely not happening now.
Yeah, and the 2 issues that show themselves, you touched on a little bit, the bully ball, right? USC over the last couple of years under Lincoln Riley has shown you come in there and you be physical with them, whether that's your defense against their offense, your offense against their defense. There's been some weaknesses there that has presented itself, and then on top of that, you compound that with Miller Moss just not being able to make those key plays. I mean, you're up 17-10 in the third quarter, deep in the third quarter, and you go quiet from there. And so that's got to be disappointing in those respects for USC. And this is, we joked about, right? I think everybody joked about it that, hey, these Pac-12 teams are soft, they're a little more high flying, which Utah was the exception, which why a lot of people are like, well, see, this is why they compete in the conference, because they're just tougher. But that stereotype proved itself in this game. So if you're USC, you got to go back to the drawing board and say, hey, we got to dig deep. We got to be more physical, because these Big Ten teams, the Minnesotas of the world, you get to Iowa, somebody like that, they're not a joke when it comes to that. They will, at the very least, come out and try to punch you in the mouth, and that's what happened.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm just pulling up the box score again to look at it. Minnesota's running for nearly 5 yards a carry. I mean, Darius Taylor, 25 for 144. Marcus Major, former OU guy who played under Lincoln Riley all the way back in the year of 2020, which feels forever ago. He has 7 carries for 37. He's putting 5.3 on his average. Minnesota could just run the ball at will at USC. And for so much hearing about how the defense has improved and how much it had looked better at times this year, it's just we've gone from the giving up 40 to now still getting bullied, but only giving up mid-20s.
Right. Yeah, you've closed some of those gaps, but there's still definitely some gaps there in that defense.
Absolutely. I mean, and now if the offense can't score, you don't have that Heisman caliber guy to carry the offense like a Caleb Williams or someone like that. These games might become more common, because keep in mind, USC's at home playing Penn State next week. And that is not going to be a fun time for the Trojans there. We will have to see how they continue to adjust to that. Obviously, we'll have the preview video coming out on Wednesday to discuss more into that. But moving on to number 4 on my list here of games of the week, results of the week, if you will. Washington. Big upset in a way, but then Washington was also favored. 27-17, Huskies take down number 10, Michigan. This one felt over in a way before it even started, and then Michigan had a lead at some point. It was one of those odd games, Tyler, where, I thought Michigan would come out and play better. I really thought they would. Did I expect Alex Orji to turn into some amazing quarterback? No. Did I expect him to play at least okay for the standards Michigan had set this year? Maybe. That did not happen. Instead, we switched quarterbacks around again, and Michigan now on their third quarterback of the year going to Tuttle. And this is a nightmare for Michigan. I mean, this is a complete devolving into, we're talking not Iowa tier offense yet of Iowa of the last few years, but if we're not there yet, we're getting there pretty quick.
Yeah, I mean, and for Michigan, the reason Vegas had this the way they had is okay, it's a long road trip, it's a conference game. Washington has proven that okay, we lost a lot, but we're still a tough enough team to give, people maybe some problems in a home atmosphere. And it felt like going into this week, okay, Michigan, if you are a team that may not be necessarily a title contender, but one that can at least mix it up still, despite all that you lost last year. After that incredible run, this is the week to prove it, and they fell short. I mean, you mentioned it fell over before it began, type of thing. I think that was that feeling, right? And with Washington coming out the way they did, establish enough of tone in the game to ride that momentum to be able to take the win.
Yeah, and I mean, this was one of those that just, I feel like I could go on talking negative about Michigan for forever in this game and what they didn't do, what they somewhat did do right. The defense still played well. Defense still had its moments for the Wolverines. That's going to happen. But Washington, the main concern I had about them going into this game is that they are a mistake-prone team. You look at, I think the best example is the Rutgers game, where you have 3 different missed field goals that gave you opportunities to tie the game, make it a little bit more competitive. You add all that up, they probably beat Rutgers. They probably survive in Piscataway. And the same thing felt like it was going to happen here. You have a turnover. You have a lot of drives where you just cannot establish yourself. Grady Gross misses a field goal, has another one blocked. It felt like, okay, Michigan went from, here we go, back from the dead. They've got the lead going into the fourth quarter. Can they hold on? And Michigan, 2 turnovers when you absolutely could not have them. Washington finally gets the break they needed. And more importantly for Washington, that not only did they get the break they needed, they finally capitalized on the breaks they needed. And for Washington, I wanted to finally see something from them. Credit to them. They've shown me that they are a capable team. They're a more than capable team. And Michigan nearly getting knocked out of the top 25 as a result of this. And honestly, Tyler, I felt like they should have been.
Yeah, I don't know if you go that harsh on them per se, but they're close, right? They're teetering. And trust me, you still got on the road against Illinois next week. Later in the season, you still got at Indiana. You still got to go to the Horseshoe, and you still got to host Oregon. So plenty of chances for Michigan to either right the ship or prove that hey, they just don't have it this year.
Yep. And the other massive result of the week, this one's in the 5 slot, but it's weird in its own way, because if you told me going into the week, and this was kind of my prediction on it, was that if there was a game that I felt like had the biggest chance of, quote unquote upset alert, it was going to be Texas A&M beating Missouri. Yes, Texas A&M was favored in this game. Yes, a lot of people did not expect, Missouri to play well on the road, and they looked shaky the past few weeks, but so would Texas A&M. And some of that you could say, well, that's a backup quarterback. That's having Marcel Reed. And let's see what a healthy Connor Wigman looks like, or at least close to healthy. And let me tell you, Tyler, if Connor Wigman's not close to healthy, I don't think I want to see him at healthy. 18 for 22, 276 through the air, making all the right decisions. But at the end of the day, this was just Texas A&M absolutely dismantling Missouri. Like, you could feel the hype train slowly going off the rails for Missouri going into this game. that train has crashed and is on fire now. All goodwill Missouri had built up is absolutely gone in this game. And this was a Missouri team that, frankly, I don't know if you'll agree with me or not on this one, but when it felt like we got to the third quarter, Le'Veon Moss busts off another big run, Missouri just quit. Missouri did not want to be here anymore. You're down 31-0. You're just going through the motions at that point. And for all the excitement Missouri had before this season started, I don't want to say the season's over for Missouri because it's obviously not. But where do you pick up the pieces and go from here?
Yeah, Brady Cook is not cooking, so to
No.
speak. And this Texas A&M team on their side, what a huge win for Mike Elko, right? You think, oh, like I said, they were favored, they were supposed to win, but I think it's the nature of the win that really set a message that hey, A&M's here to play. And now, quietly look at the standings; they're currently leading the SEC. Wigman healthy. For a guy that didn't throw a touchdown this game, played as well as you could have, right? Managed the offense beautifully. Got the run game that we know Texas A&M has been able to establish, and especially will continue to do so under Mike Elko because he's that type of guy. So a huge win in that sense. And then for Missouri, I mean, it's simply got to execute, and you've got to find a way to run the ball. I mean, for an offensive line that got some big pieces transferred over, you talk about King Green coming over there, um, 30 carries, 68 yards, 2.3 a carry. That's disgusting. And part of that is A&M obviously give them credit, but yeah, when it feels like you gave up, I mean, that's not a good sign for the health of the locker room. So they got to find a way to motivate themselves now because it is still a long season ahead in the SEC. Still a lot of twists and turns to come. You still got to go to Bama, got to host Oklahoma, and we've seen Arkansas pull off the upset, so there's no easy road really for Missouri from here.
Absolutely. And the other thing, you mentioned it, the run game not going, and you mentioned Brady Cook not playing well. Just looking at the stats here, because I've been kind of scrolling it on the screen so the audience can see. I mean, this was, no turnovers for Missouri, but Texas A&M outgains them by over 200 yards. I mean, looking at it here, obviously touching on Le'Veon Moss and the big day he had. You can see it, 12 carries for 138, 3 touchdowns. This is a game where A&M's averaging 6.5 yards a carry. I mean, they are just absolutely blasting Missouri. And you look at Missouri's receiving core. We talked about, Luther Burden is obviously the guy everyone talks about, but you need someone like a Theo Weiss to step up, someone else to get going as well to help kind of carry the burden away from Burden, if you will. And that didn't happen in this game. A&M's defense, and this is what I was expecting from Mike Elko. This is why I love that hire so much for A&M. He brings competency. He brings basic fundamental football, something that A&M had been lacking at times where they could never really play a full game together. Texas A&M, I don't mean to get too much involved on the Aggies yet, but the day is coming for A&M. If they could continue to build up like this, especially this year, some of their bigger games, they are setting a strong foundation, not only for the rest of the season, but for the future as well.
Couldn't have said it better, kid.
And that brings us to Tyler. I know we agreed on 4 of the 5 when it comes to games of the week here, but I know you've got another one that piqued your interest. It piqued mine as well, but not enough as these 5 games. And I believe that was the Miami Cal game we've got to talk about now as well.
Yeah, that one was one where a lot of people were probably already asleep, especially when Cal goes up 35-10. And the reason it makes the list for me among all the upsets that you could have picked from, oh, Miami survives off a controversial call as well. They probably should not have won this game, but it's 2 weeks in a row they pulled one from the fire. Right? That's 2 weeks in a row where half this game you're going, this team's fraudulent, but at the end of the day, they get the win. And sometimes, again, easier to criticize, like we talked about last week, easier to criticize from a win rather than a loss. So you survive Cal, you survive the Calgorithm as they've started to become. Cam Ward at times didn't look great in this game, but boy, again, did he finish strong. So if you're Miami, you say, hey, if we just play 4 quarters of competent football, like you were similarly kind of early in the season, right? Yes, against not great competition. But if you could get back to where you look like early in the season, this could be a sneaky, dangerous team still. I still believe in that. And their schedule the rest of the way isn't really anything too super bad. We'll talk about this team potentially a little later, but Louisville now on the road doesn't look maybe as tough. You got Duke, Florida State at home after that. Miami's pass, you would believe they're tougher tests. So um, Syracuse at the end of the season might be their toughest. So
Might be, yeah.
they've got the inside track to say, okay, we can sneak into a top four team, but you've got to be consistent. Play 4 quarters of good football again.
Absolutely. And the thing that stands out to me about this game is I agree with you. This was a game that, it's 35-10. I was ready to call it. Like, this was one where I was like, if this was one more touchdown and Cal can put this game away, everyone could go to sleep. We got 6 of the top 11 losing. What an amazing day in college football, made even better by a little after dark magic. But Miami just started, they had gassed Cal. And if you're still awake watching this game, you're thinking, okay, what's Miami's body clock at? They're playing at 2 a.m. Eastern, essentially. This is getting way late into the night in an environment they're not used to, not just because of being all the way out there on the West Coast and, the crowd that Cal had drawn for this game, but because of that issue as well. Miami gets to kind of conserve a little bit here. You look at time of possession, 37 and a half minutes for Miami compared to 22 for Cal. And just showing the chart here, that third quarter late, Miami goes on a 5-minute drive and scores. And then Cal just absolutely goes into a shell. And it's the one thing you can't do when you're playing a team with a good quarterback like Cam Ward and some playmakers. You cannot let a guy like Restrepo get going. You cannot let him really start to make those big plays. That's exactly what Cal did. Now, I'll talk about the controversy a little bit, because last week we were both in agreement that at the end of the day, it was controversial, but it was the right call that Miami got to beat Virginia Tech. We were both in agreement on that. But this one, I'm going to go complete opposite. That was targeting. It was 100% targeting. You cannot get a better definition of it. Miami got absolutely bailed out here. And they still might have won the game. I'm not saying that 100% ends the game, but Miami would have had to burn their timeouts. It would have been a completely different scenario. But like you said, the way Miami found a way to win, they still were able to get the job done. It still would have been a 38-32 game that people would have taken away. Hey, at least Miami didn't get blown out. And I think that's a big deal for them. But the last point I'll have on this before we get to winners of the week is this Miami team reminds me of, if you remember the Mark Richt Miami team that, goes undefeated most of the year. I want to say it was 2017 or 2018. I think 2017, where they're 10-0 and then they lose to Pitt. And then they get beat up by Clemson in the ACC title game. What will happen to Miami this year if they encounter a game like that? Will they do what Miami has done previously and fold? Or are they going to do what the Miami of old, the 80s Miami, the early 2000s Miami, and say, okay, we're going to come back better, we're going to come back stronger, and we're going to be fine? That's what I want to see when that bump finally does happen to Miami. They've dodged 2 bullets. How many more can they dodge?
No question. It's weird to say, but we still don't really know what Miami is.
It is weird.
Where we're at with
It is weird to say at the absolute least. But folks, it's time to get to winners of the week. And for my winner, it's pretty obvious. It's Vanderbilt. Who else could it be? You beat the number 1 team in the country. You beat Alabama. All the things I said earlier on. I thought about just giving it to Diego Pavia himself because of the game he played and because this man literally drops an F-bomb on the SEC network and then says the word turnt 30 seconds later, just nonchalantly. And then he goes on Twitter this morning to apologize for swearing on national television. Just one of the great characters of college football in general. He played phenomenal. Vanderbilt as a team played phenomenal, though. That's why Vanderbilt gets the whole team gets to be winners of the week, as they rightfully should be. So, Tyler, who do you have as your winner of the week? Or did we lose time? Oh, there we go.
No, I'm here.
Okay.
I'm here. Anyways, a little side note before I get into my winners of the week, winner of the week. Can we come to an agreement that, hey, if you upset number 1 and you're unranked, that you're allowed 1 swear word? Is that okay? Or can we show emotion?
I think you should be allowed all the swear words you want, personally. If you want to go on a, Mike Leach style tirade where you just start saying stream of consciousness, whatever comes to your brain, you should be allowed to do whatever you want if you beat the number one team in the country. If you're
I don't know
Vanderbilt
if
beating any ranked team, you should be allowed to do whatever, considering where their program has been.
I don't know where I'm quite on that, but I just when you get to the winners of the week, for the sake of difference and the sake of wider scope, for one, hey, anybody who did not play and that was in the top 25 this week, congrats, you won because you didn't have to go through that
There you
chaos, right?
go.
And then secondly, America, we win because my goodness, what a glorious sport college football is still, despite all the people thinking it may be dead soon.
I mean, this was one of those weeks that, not to dwell on this too much, but just, people always have this debate, is college football at one point in time going to turn into the NFL light? And I look at what I saw last night, where in the span of 3 or 4 hours, I saw 4 different fields get stormed. You're seeing college kids rip up goalposts,
Right.
carry them down, and throw them, going down Broadway in Nashville to throw it in the Cumberland River. I mean, you've got people doing all sorts of crazy stuff you'll never see in professional sports. And it's just, the college game is so special. It's something that you don't see really anywhere else in the world. You don't ever see this on any other continent, any other place than the U.S. So, America, winners of the week. I'll tie that back in later because I think America won for another reason as well that we'll get to later. But I got to talk about loser of the week. And Tyler, you joked about it last night when I was talking to you, and we're both in agreement. They were your loser of the week last week. It's Oklahoma State. I mean, this is embarrassing. We have gone into embarrassing territory for Oklahoma State. Lose 38-14 to West Virginia in a game that wasn't even that close.
No, it didn't feel that close. And Oklahoma State just got bullied. I mean, just got bullied the entire way in that game. And I don't know if we have the conversation now or if we wait another week of disaster, but when do people start saying, okay, might be time for a new voice in that locker room? Is Gundy really on the hot seat at this point? And I think it's because there's so much hype coming into the season about this Oklahoma State team. Yeah, you knew Bowman maybe wasn't great, but he was good enough. And man, when you give up 389 yards, 6 yards a carry on 65 carries, and your defense is supposed to be as stout as it is, that's disappointing when Ollie Gordon and your offense could only average 1.7 yards a carry. Again, disgusting. I don't know where the answers are for this Oklahoma State team right now.
Yeah, and that's why they're the biggest loser in the week. Is there any sign, and I don't mean to sound like the sky is falling. Usually I don't try to do that. But where is any hope for Oklahoma State? Where is any sign of things are going to get better? You look at the time of possession. West Virginia nearly held on the ball for 43 minutes. You mentioned just able to bully them near over 300 rushing yards. Oklahoma State has 2 turnovers. Alan Bowman was supposed to be the guy this year. Then he got pulled for Garrett Rangel against Utah. Then Mike Gundy said, no, Bowman is the guy. I just did that because I felt I had to. Now you have to pull him again. Ollie Gordon gets injured. And even when the commentators are saying that might be Ollie Gordon's last game ever played at Oklahoma State, that you probably should if you care about your draft stock more because your O-line's going to get you killed. And Ollie Gordon, if he can't do anything, you're relying on Alan Bowman to throw the ball. That's an adventure in and of itself at this point. There is no sign of optimism anywhere for Oklahoma State. People wanted Casey Dunn, the offense coordinator, fired for years, even considering what happened last year. That was just more of a weird circumstance for Oklahoma State fans. But then you have that expectation that things are going to get better. The defense has regressed a whole lot. There are people I've seen on Twitter saying they need to start boycotting homecoming, which is a giant deal at Oklahoma State.
Oof,
This
that'd
is
be rough.
turning into, as much as Mike Gundy's been a legend at Oklahoma State, and I know the conversation is always, who do you get to replace him? I think you could put you or me there and it might be a better job at this rate. I mean, Oklahoma State is heading down the barrel, looking down the barrel of despair at this rate, where do you see a path to bowl eligibility? That's where we're at now for a team that a lot of people thought would be a conference championship contender, maybe make the playoff if they play good enough. And now we're looking at, can they get to 6 wins? And I don't even know if they can at this point. They might go 5-7. It's
Yeah,
it's rough.
It's rough.
All right, Tyler. Well, I could keep yelling about that forever, but who do you got as your biggest loser this week?
I'm going to go a little off the wall here, and this one was kind of lost in the shuffle, I think, of the upsets. It's got to be Louisville, right? We talked about all the reasons last week where, hey, they might position themselves well going into that Notre Dame game if they get past it. They didn't, but you say, yeah, well, it's not in the conference, so you still have a chance. You still got some big dates left to prove yourself, and you fall to SMU, who has been playing good ball, but still, that's one you got to win at home, right? If you're a legit contender. So for them to come out and drop that one after that Notre Dame game, two tough back-to-back losses, I'm not sure they've got enough time to really recoup themselves because you still got Miami coming to town. You still got to go to Clemson. Still got Pitt coming to town. Kentucky, who's been opportunistic. You got to go on the road for that one. So tough break for the Cardinals, but yeah, they might have just proven to themselves that we just aren't that team this year in the ACC.
Yeah, I think, it's weird that we've had this discussion 3 straight weeks about Louisville, where it's just, the upside is clearly there, but, you can never have a college football team where you can just only look at the upsides. You got to take the good with the bad. And unfortunately, there's a decent amount of bad right now for Louisville. I'll talk about them a little bit more, kind of more from the SMU side of things when we get into best of the rest. But I think Louisville, a good contender this week for loser of the week. Not as bad as other programs, but from where you want to be, I think it's a pretty good pick. But that will get us to the next part here. It is finally time for power rankings. I'll put up the AP poll here so you can kind of look at that. But Tyler, I don't know how to feel about this power rankings wise this week because with Alabama losing, with Tennessee losing, with all this craziness going on, the power rankings very clearly for me should be this. Number one is Texas. They're the only team that when you play a bad team, you destroy them. That's what Texas has done this year. They got no losses. They really haven't had any blemishes outside of a bad half against Mississippi State. That's their only real negative against them. And it feels like right now it should just be Texas and everybody else. That's just where we are in college football this year. Of course, you got to put 4 other teams in here, so that's what we'll do. But at the same time, just my goodness, Georgia, Ohio State, Oregon, kind of all in that 2 to 4 mesh. You could really rank them however you want to. Ohio State and Oregon, they've had some moments this year where they've looked a little uncertain at times. Ohio State only a 7-0 lead against Iowa at halftime. Obviously, they cleaned that up in the second half. Oregon playing Michigan State up 31-0. Defense looked great. They did what they were supposed to, give up 10 points in garbage time. I'm not going to be too gripey about that. But Dylan Gabriel throwing 2 red zone picks. If I remember correctly, both were thrown in the end zone, or I think one was picked off at the 2-yard line. Gabriel playing not as good as we know he's capable of. And then Georgia. Georgia's in this mix because I think they're maybe the most talented of those 3, but they do have the loss to Alabama. They got into a slow start themselves against Auburn. Of course, they bounced back from it and ended up winning that game by 18. But that 2 through 4 is really interchangeable to me. And then at number 5 right now, maybe the most solid team in college football, Penn State at number 5. They are solid. There's nothing they're going to do that's going to 100% wow you. But there's nothing they're going to do that you go, wow, that is bad. That needs to be fixed immediately. A casual 27-11 win over UCLA. UCLA got 8 of that 11 in garbage time. Penn State, nothing fancy. Just go out, take care of business.
And here's where I think you'll get interesting because I'm going to, the top 4, if you will, in the poll this week with Texas, Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State. I think that's all right. Those have been teams that have they had their close calls here and there, at the exception of Texas. Yeah, but they've survived them, and we've seen other people not do that. For my 5th team, though, Cade, one that's quietly on the rise. It's playing with a guy that played Ohio the last couple years of his career, was really good there, and he's off to a fantastic start. Give me the Indiana Hoosiers as my 5th team in this
Oh,
poll,
man.
and you're going, why? Well, again, you look at their schedule. Have they played anybody dynamic? Not necessarily. You've steamrolled FIU, Western Illinois, took care of UCLA, smacked Charlotte, Maryland, and you blew out Northwestern this week. That's not a tough schedule. Not saying it is. and they've still got Michigan, Ohio State to come. We don't know what Michigan will be by that point, and Washington. But this is an Indiana team that, at least so far, against teams that, okay, if you are legit, you're going to be, taking care of them. They have, and with, you know, uh, Rourke leading the way like he is, 1,700 yards, 14 touchdowns, over 70% completion percentage. Their run game solid, averaging 5 yards carry there among multiple runners. Right now, at least, this is looking like a solid enough team that maybe they quietly creep up and put themselves in a spot to be in the Big Ten championship game. I don't know what their ceiling is per se. I don't know how far that road extends, but I like what Indiana's doing, and they're quietly rising. They will have those opportunities in the coming weeks now as the schedule turns for them to really show whether they're legit or not.
And I agree with you there. I think the Indiana conversation is going to be had. It's going to have to be had. You look at their schedule and you almost think, they should be 9-0. If they're as good as we think they are, they should be 9-0 with Michigan coming to town. And so I'm
What a wild
intrigued.
world it would be.
I'm intrigued to see how Indiana progresses. I'm not there. I'm not going to be as bold as you to put them there yet. They're definitely up the list of teams. They're definitely there. But I'm not ready to go that far yet. I think, if we're going power rankings wise, I don't even know who a clear number 6 would be because Miami didn't really prove anything. Alabama and Tennessee sure didn't prove anything this week. Clemson, I mean, they played all right. Ole Miss, they did their job. Iowa State looked fine. There's no one really amazing this year, it feels like. It's Texas and everybody else. Now, that'll change in a few weeks. We're going to learn a lot more about these teams over the next 2 to 3 weeks. But it's still a wide open race as of right now. And I think that continues when we look at the group of 5 teams as well, because Syracuse beat UNLV this week. And yet I didn't really change my top 3 a whole lot. Boise still at number 1. Really, Ashton Jeanty should be number 1. To be clear, Boise State could be 2. But Boise State, still, same thing I said about them last week. Defense played all right. You give up 30 to Utah State. Some of that's backups and things like that. Ashton Jeanty, talk about it more when we get to the Heisman race real quick. Explosive offense. You expect that from Boise at this point. Number 2, I've still got UNLV. They did not do anything in my mind to make them go down a spot. Some of that was James Madison losing. They're out of the top 3. And because you talked about it, America's a winner this week, Tyler. And I, for one, respect our troops. So Army is number 3 in my top 3 group of 5 power rankings. You would talk about Army. Number 2 in offensive efficiency. You've got good old Bryson Daly, 10 rushing TDs, 5 passing TDs. Army is 5-0 for the first time since 1996. And Army running for 361 yards per game. That's number 1 in America. And top 5 in scoring defense, only allowing 9.8 points per game. Army and Navy, both 5-0 for the first time since 1945. Hooray for America on that one, Tyler.
What a crazy stat. And I think we're pretty much in agreement. It's really, to me, Boise State's got the clear, it's their spot to lose, at this point. UNLV will have their chance to prove themselves. That's why they remain number 2. And yeah, I'm all in on Army. Let's do it. Bryson Daly, West Texas product in terms of his high school ball. So you got to appreciate that. What I always say, Kate, I've told you this multiple times. Go find me a 3-star. And it doesn't even have to be a 3-star. Just find me a good Texas, especially West Texas quarterback, and we can make some magic in college football. And that's what's happening here. So really love what Army is doing right now, no question. And their hype, I think, will grow. I think if they keep taking care of business quietly, yeah, Boise will have their say. But if Boise trips up, Army is right there to take advantage, and they'll have their proving ground with that Notre Dame game still to come. So that can be their big marquee. They're hosting that one. It'll be on NBC in November, late November. So, yeah, I like it. I like that 1, 2, 3 you got there.
That also, keep in mind, Navy will also have to play Notre Dame at some point. So Army and Navy will both get their crack to show everyone who they are on a national stage this year. So if Army loses, Navy's taking that spot. That's more than likely. We're keeping the United States Military Academy in here right now, but Navy might put up a good fight. But let's look at Heisman top 3 real quick, Tyler, because after the week we had Jalen Milroe, you can throw his name out at least for now. We'll see what happens with everyone else, because it's Ashton Genty's world and we're all living in it, Tyler. I mean, you're talking about
Can't get enough of the man. Oh,
just 13 carries for 186, 3 touchdowns, 5 games in the season. Already over 1,000 yards on the ground, Tyler. I mean, this is ridiculous. Number 2 should also be Ashton Genty. He's that good. There's no one around him right now in the Heisman race. If you got to put someone, I guess Cam Ward is going to be the guy that comes in there. You know, he went 35 for 53, 437 through the air, 2 touchdowns, had a rushing TD as well. I don't really think there should be a number 3 right now. Colorado in a bye, so there's nothing really to talk about Travis Hunter-wise. There's no real other options right now besides Genty and then maybe Ward if you want to give it to a quarterback, but I can't really think of anyone else right now, Tyler.
yeah, and I think really the only thing we learned this week is that the order changes, kind of like you're touching on. Genty should be the favorite. Remember, he sat 2 second half so far this season, so he could be at closer to 1,300 yards. That's insane. That is insane. Um, I think Milroe will still have the chance to have some signature moments. Loss hurts, but it's not the end of the world. And Cam Ward just quietly keeps winning. So, and he's put up big numbers doing so. So when you get to the end of the year and look back, you're going to say, okay, well, he put up a lot of big numbers and pulled his team out of the fire a couple of times, which, you know, that could easily lend itself to Heisman if everything falls right. So no new contenders, but I think Genty now should be the clear number 1.
I agree with you there. I think it is bad timing for anyone else, but hey, if you're good old Boise State, you're fine right now. But looking at it here, it's time to get into the best of the rest. And you look at it for best of the rest, and I mean, it is pretty simple this week looking at what all's been going on. SMU Louisville, let's just take a look at it real quick. Talked about it a little bit from that SMU side. This is a big win for SMU. I mean, this is just switching things around here. Mustangs switching quarterbacks, going from Stone to Jennings. I think everyone thought SMU might have taken a dip offensively. It did not happen. The Pony Express is back, folks, at SMU's offense, still continuing to play well. Talked about it a little bit on the Louisville side, but I want to switch things real quick to the next game to talk about. I think the one that is more intriguing to me, and that is Syracuse and UNLV. This was just a barn burner. I mean, this was a classic Friday night, going to overtime, late night in Vegas type of deal. I mean, putting the entire scoring summary up here takes up nearly the entire page on ESPN. That should tell you everything you know, or everything you should know about one of these kind of games. Syracuse, Kyle McCord, what else can you say about him? Look at that, 40 for 63, 355 through the air, 3 touchdowns. Haj Malik Williams, he had a good night as well. This was a game where you felt bad because somebody had to lose. And unfortunately, that team was UNLV. UNLV's defense just absolutely gassed when they get to the fourth quarter. And later in the fourth quarter, especially, Syracuse able to come back, win the game in overtime. I know there was some controversy there with the officiating. I didn't think it was as bad in this game. And again, kind of that main point we've talked about. You look at time of possession. Syracuse with the ball for nearly 40 minutes. If you've noticed, that's been a theme this week. Teams holding on to the ball more, trying to get the other defense worn out. That's what Syracuse was able to do. And I mean, just how about the season the Orange have had so far right now? Syracuse just playing absolutely phenomenal ball. It is incredible to see the ACC just kind of having that revolving door of teams that are good enough, maybe borderline top 25. Syracuse trying to throw their name in the hat as well. And then Nebraska and Rutgers. I wanted to talk about this one a little bit just because we thought this would be a defensive showdown, and it was. I mean, this is classic. You want to talk about Big Ten football, 14-7. That's Big Ten football for you. I felt that Nebraska had the opportunity to win a one-possession game here. This was a game that was ugly. It was back and forth at times. Sometimes it was back and forth between nobody. This is what happens when you have two good defenses go up against each other. And a big win for Nebraska. Even though, you know, the offense isn't there, the defense standing up time and time again, holding Monagai to 78 yards on 19 carries, which still might sound like a lot. But for a guy as talented as him, that is incredible for Nebraska. And then going through the quick wrap up here, final game to talk about, Texas Tech and Arizona and the Red Raiders. I mean, you talk about back and forth the entire game. Texas Tech a 28-22 win over Arizona. Arizona's defense got them back in this game. Texas Tech at one point had an 18-3 lead. Looked like things were going to get rough for Arizona. They wanted this to be a loud environment for this one, and it was. Arizona brought the atmosphere at times, but Arizona just kept clawing back in it with field goals. Eventually took the lead in the fourth, but Texas Tech pulling it right back. 5 combined turnovers in this game. Arizona tried to control the clock for as long as they could, but Noah Fafita with a few costly turnovers. Taj Brooks played phenomenal, had a fumble here and there, but other than that, I thought he played well. A weird game, that's typical in the Big 12. You're going to get some weird ones. It's just, can you find a way to survive? And that's what Texas Tech did to get to 5-1. A little bit weird to say Texas Tech relying on their defense to get the job done, but that is exactly what happened there in Tucson. So, folks, that will do it for this week. Wrapping things up and yeah, that is right. I nearly messed up my own analogy that I was correct on. Putting this thing away here in week 6. It's going to be a fun adventure. So if you want to continue us on the ride here, obviously we'll have the preview video for week 7 coming out. Should be on Wednesday. Feel free to like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment down below. Tell us, is there anything you agree with, disagree with, have your own thoughts about a wild upset week. And as always, hit that notification bell as well to stay notified when new videos come out. But until next time, everyone, have a good one.